Hello and welcome. I'm absolutely ecstatic to see people in the shrine room. It's so good, so nice to see, well, half of your faces, if not all of them. If anybody feels very uncomfortable, and provided you've been vaccinated, you could take your mask off. It's up to you. It's whatever you feel comfortable with. But it would mean that you would have to have been fully vaccinated. I'm sorry about that, but it's just the way things are at the moment. I mean, you know, I'm so used to being here just with one person, which is Marcus, who's been doing the filming for the online sessions, that it feels quite weird to sort of suddenly see faces. Weird in a good way. On the other hand, I was very, very happy that we could do the online teachings, and we will continue with them. It's not that they're going to stop, because even if we're open, we're not going to be open in the same way as we were before. You know, we won't be open every day or anything like that. So I'm very grateful for the online possibilities, and also to welcome anybody who is watching online and joining us in that way. So you're still very, very welcome, even though I can't see your faces. So today is a really special day, not just because we're opening, but the reason why I chose today is because, well, really it was chosen for me because it's the 5th anniversary of Samye Dzong Edinburgh in this centre. So 5 years ago today we had the first opening here, which, I mean, I don't know how we got 90-odd people in here. It was almost 100 people, and people were squashed in. There was definitely no social distancing that day. But somehow we managed. So in comparison, this is relatively modest, but it still feels big to me, you know, after having only one person. So yeah, and then on top of being at our 5th anniversary, that initial opening day was on the wheel day of the commemorating the Buddha's Enlightenment. So this time, this whole week is one of the most, if not the most holy week in the Buddhist calendar, because on the Wednesday that's just been was the anniversary of the Buddha's birth, and on the Wednesday to come is the wheel day of the Buddha's Enlightenment. So I chose this day in the middle because it's our 5th anniversary, it's a Saturday, and it represents all of the holy days of the Buddha. And, you know, I think it's the most appropriate because, after all, the Buddha's the source, the Buddha is the beginning and of Buddhism, and let's hope that this is the beginning of Samye Dzong Edinburgh being able to be open in gradual stages, you know, that we all feel comfortable with. So there's a lot of sort of juggling to go on, but yeah, I think if we just are very wise and careful, then we can enjoy being in a situation where we can pray and meditate and learn together. So let's start with the introductory prayers. So it's on the side which says introductory prayers. So you've got double-sided. So we'll say the prayers. I'll say it in English first, just for anybody that isn't very familiar with it, and also to remind us of the meaning. Excuse me. So what we'll do is we'll say the Refuge Prayer first. I'll say it in English once, and then we'll say it in the Tibetan phonetics twice, so 3 times in all. And then the following 2 prayers, may all beings have happiness, we'll say that once. First, I'll say it in English, and then we'll say it together in the Tibetan. And then the prayer to the Guru, I'll say in English, and then we'll say together once in the Tibetan phonetics. So let's just attune our minds, relax, and tune into the Buddha and all the bodhisattvas and the whole lineage. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the noblest Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. Through the virtue generated by the practice of generosity and other virtues, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. Sanjay Chotang Suji Chonam La Changchu Badu Dani Chapsunchi Dagi Jinso Jipe Sanamji Dola Pinche Sanjay Draparsho Sanjay Chotang Suji Chonam La Changchung Padu Dani Chapsunchi Dagi Jinso Jepe Sonamji Dola Pinche Sanjay Parsho. May all beings have happiness and create the causes of happiness. May they all be free from suffering and from creating the causes of suffering. May they find that noble happiness that can never be tainted by suffering. May they attain universal, impartial compassion beyond worldly bias towards friends or enemies. Sem chen tam che dewa tang, dewe je tang dempa je chik, dunyao tang, dunyao chi je tang trawar je chik, dunyao me pe dewa tam pa tang min trawar je chik, niring cha dang tang trawe tang nyom, chempo la ne pa jor chik. Wonderful, precious root guru, residing on a lotus and moon seat above my head, I pray that you take me into your care with your vast kindness and give to me the siddhis of body, speech, and mind. Paden sawe alama rinpoche, dagi chiwo pende de shukla, Kachin chimpo gone jesungti, kusun chuchi nyudup sa tu so. Okay, so today I want to really give thanks, give praise and appreciation to the Buddha, because without the Buddha, there wouldn't be any Buddhism. And without Buddhism, we wouldn't have any teachers or Dharma, and we wouldn't be here. So sometimes I think the Buddha seems like he's so far distant in the past, and you know, there's so many teachings that have come after him and commentaries, which are wonderful. And I'm not in any way downplaying them, but I think sometimes it's really good to go back to the root of it all, the source of it all, Buddha Shakyamuni. So there's I came across this commentary. Well, we're going to be saying the 12 deeds of the Buddha together. Of course, the Buddha did many more than 12 main deeds, but they were sort of categorized, or you could say chosen, for being very, very significant in the journey, in his journey. And the journey of the Buddha, we need to understand this, is that the reason why he was born and lived that life in the way that he did was as a kind of signpost to us. So all the deeds that we appreciate the Buddha doing, he didn't do them for himself, or he didn't have to do them other than to show the way to go, so that we would have a path to follow. Of course, everybody has to follow their own path, but in a kind of route or a blueprint, you could say it's like a blueprint of his deeds. So I found this really lovely commentary on the 12 deeds, because the 12 deeds themselves, when you read the praises to the 12 deeds, which we're going to say later, it's quite succinct and very kind of, you don't really have time to think about too much, you know, because every phrase has so much meaning. So I found this commentary on it, which is by Trunga Rinpoche, the great Trunga Rinpoche, who's been the teacher of the 16th Karmapa and the 17th Karmapa, and is a very, very wonderful teacher, and has been to Samye Ling many, many times, and who I was fortunate enough to meet just before all this COVID and lockdown happened at Nama Buddha in Nepal. I do hope that all the people in Nepal and you know, especially our Dharma friends and the great teachers, I hope they're all safe. Actually, yesterday I got a notice from Rokpa. So if anybody feels that they want to help in Nepal, you can via Rokpa, because I wasn't sure how to even go about it, and then suddenly I got this thing. So if you go online and Google Rokpa Nepal, or you can find that way of contributing, and they're doing some wonderful work out there. Anyway, so Trunga Rinpoche wrote this this sort of commentary on the 12 deeds, which I'm going to talk to you about. So he also says that, you know, these 12 deeds are not just the only 12 deeds, but these are the most famous recorded ones, most important. So the first deed is called descending from Toshita. So Toshita is the heavenly realm. So the Buddha was in this heavenly realm before he took birth on planet Earth. Now, whether he was fully enlightened as the Buddha or whether he was a 10th level bodhisattva is not exactly clear, but either way, is a highly enlightened being. And so when the Buddha was teaching in the heavens of Toshita, which is a realm, kind of a god realm, and also some Sambhogakaya realm, the sound of his previous motivation in previous lifetimes reminded him that it was necessary to take birth in the world to teach the Dharma, that the time had come. He had already made that aspiration, commitment, eons ago, and now the time had come. Because you have to remember also that Shakyamuni Buddha is not the first and only Buddha. He's the 5th one that we know about. But we're talking about, you know, time beyond history, beyond our modern history. So he considered 5 things about the land where he should be born and all of this. So he wanted to be born in Kapila in Nepal, and the caste he should be born into, which was the royal caste, the family in which he should be born was the Shakya clan. His mother was Mahadevi, and that the time was right for him to be born, which was when the 5 degenerations or mind poisons were on the increase. So in other words, he chose to be born when it was most needed, when things were pretty bad, in a degenerate time. That's why, that was the whole purpose of him being born. So after having made these aspirations and determinations, he left Toshita paradise and took birth in the world. So this particular deed of leaving Toshita has a special significance because it's intended to teach us that somebody who had achieved enlightenment is no longer a slave to their karma, that they have a choice. Unlike us, we have to be born wherever our karma takes us, but a Buddha or a great bodhisattva has a choice in the matter, and that's how he was able to choose how and when he would be born. Then we come to the second deed, which was conception into the womb. So the Buddha was conceived into the womb of his mother, Mayadevi. By taking the form of a white elephant, he descended from Toshita and entered the womb immaculately. So you might think, well, if he is so miraculous, why did he choose to enter a womb? He could have been born in a lotus like Guru Rinpoche, or had some kind of miraculous birth, or just descended from the sky. But Buddha had a reason to be born in the normal way, which is that he wanted people to identify with him. not to think, oh, well, it's okay for him because he's a Buddha and he's miraculous. But so he wanted to show that it was possible for ordinary human beings to do what he was about to do. So that's why he decided to take a fairly normal birth. And so he wanted to be able to inspire people and any disciples, and so he entered the womb in that way. And that would inspire and instill confidence in any future disciples. Then the third deed was the actual birth, which was in the garden of Lumbini in present-day Nepal. So at that time, although it was a birth with a human mother, there were still many very special things that happened. So there were crops were growing where they had never grown before in land that was previously barren. Trees appeared that had never been there before, and rare flowers suddenly appeared. And due to these events, from that moment onwards, he was given the name Siddhartha. Siddhartha in Sanskrit means the one that makes everything possible. So he became Prince Siddhartha because he was born into the royal family, so he was a prince. So he was Prince Siddhartha. And as a result of the interdependent origination, the presence of a highly accomplished individual produces change in the environment, which is why flowers were able to suddenly appear. Then the fourth deed, so there he was living in the palace, growing up. He was obviously a very exceptional child. I'm not going to go through the entire story of the Buddha, because I think most of you know that. If you don't, then I did a whole course on it recently called Discovering Buddhism, so feel free to check that out. So the next deed is when he was growing up, and he was probably a teenager, and around that time he was getting the best of everything. His parents gave him the best of everything. They didn't particularly want him to become a Buddha or a holy person. They wanted him to become a great ruler. So they had everything in the palace was just beautiful and luxurious, and he had the very best education in everything. So in the arts and sciences, the sports, everything. And of course he excelled in them all. So you might think, well, if the Buddha was a Buddha and so highly wise and knowledgeable and had all the qualities of a Buddha, why would he have to have this ordinary education? I mean, a very good education, but still kind of cultural education that we can kind of identify with. And that was the reason, so that we could identify with him. And it was to avoid this sort of misunderstanding that the Buddha was somebody special and only he could do what he was going to do. It was to kind of give him some identification with ordinary beings. And that, also that he needed to learn, and that we need to learn. So this, he didn't want to give rise to this idea that, well, only he could do it and he didn't have to learn anything. He did have to learn, and we would have to learn to develop the good qualities. And so to overcome these misconceptions, the Buddha worked at becoming a scholar and became extremely skilled at all the different arts and sciences and sports. So it shows us that it was necessary to receive a full education in the culture into which we are born. Not only in the Dharma, but normal kind of education. Then he grew up and had experienced all sorts of pleasures of the court. There were lots of lovely ladies there. And but eventually he did marry, and he got married to Yashodhara, and she bore him a son called Rahula. And so again, the Buddha did this so that his future disciples would think that wouldn't think that an enlightened person doesn't need to enjoy themselves in the worldly way, or that it's beyond them, or something like that. So he took a wife, and they had a child. And the other reason for the Buddha living such a kind of sensuous life was to show that even though the Buddha had everything that ordinary people would want, all the luxuries, all the education, a beautiful wife, whatever he wanted, he had all of these worldly things. But it was important that people also understood that he became dissatisfied with this. So that he found that there was a higher form of happiness. Not just he looked beyond the worldly happiness. And this again is to show us as an example. So somebody who has absolutely everything that money could buy and the perfect situation could still be dissatisfied when he comes to realize that these things don't have any lasting pleasure. So the sixth deed was that of renunciation. So having attained everything that most people would give their arm and a leg for, he realized that it wasn't really the main purpose of life. So the palace that he was staying in was enclosed with very high walls. It was actually more like a town, it wasn't just one building, it was a huge area with many, many people, and all beautifully dressed and all living very luxurious lives. So this palace had high walls, and it had 4 gates in each direction. If you're familiar with the mandala drawing, it kind of like that, with sort of doors. Actually, this room's a bit like that. I often think that this room's like a mandala. It's got doors all over it, actually, more than 4. Don't even bother counting. But anyway, so the Buddha went for a walk outside of the palace in each of the doors, and each time he left, he experienced a different truth. So the first time he went out was through the eastern gate of the palace. Now you have to remember that he'd never come into contact with ordinary life and all its sort of nitty-gritty stuff. He'd only experienced the absolute luxury and beauty. So when he went out to the eastern gate and he saw the suffering of a very old man, really kind of bent over and looking in pain and sort of very old and decrepit. And it's the first time that he'd ever seen such a being. And so it really shocked him. And then he discovered that for the first time he experienced how human beings degenerate, that they get older and they get more frail, and this really struck him. And then another time he left the palace through the southern gate, and he saw a very sick person. Now imagine India and Nepal at that time, it wasn't everybody's tucked away in hospitals, it was all on the street. It even still is to this day to a large degree compared to here. But it's not, and certainly then it would not be uncommon to see somebody seriously sick, let's say a leper or somebody like that, somebody who was very obviously really suffering with a sickness. And so he discovered also at that time that all people suffer to a greater or lesser degree. All people get sick at some time in their life. Even as children we get sick, don't we? And then the next time he went out through the western gate, and then he saw a dead person. He saw a corpse in the street. Even I once was in Nepal and I saw a corpse in the street. Somebody had got shot, so that's why I saw a corpse. But I mean, in those days that was not uncommon. And then they'd be taken to the charnel ground, which again was in view of everybody. It wasn't, on a mortuary, all nice and clean. It was in your face. Death is really in your face. And so it really hit him hard, because he realized that no matter how rich you are, or whether you're a prince or a pauper, or how much pleasure or enjoyment you have, there's nothing you can do to run away from death and from the sufferings of old age and sickness. And he realized that there was no way to avoid these. Even a king cannot buy their way out of suffering. No one can fight and defeat these three kinds of suffering. But then the Buddha realized that, well, maybe there is a way out of the practice of suffering through the practicing of a spiritual path. And he understood this when he left the palace through the northern gate, and he saw a monk begging in the street. And at that moment he felt great weariness with his own life of luxury. It kind of didn't taste the same, it's lost its attraction. After everything that he'd experienced, and then he saw this monk going on his alms round, and he felt, well, maybe there is a way then. Maybe there is a way out of suffering, and to follow a spiritual path. And he felt this so strongly that eventually he decided to, when he went back to the palace, all of the pleasures that he'd enjoyed previously just weren't the same anymore, And he thought he has to get back to what's really meaningful and to pursue the truth. And a greater meaning in life than just having all these worldly pleasures. And so that brings us to the seventh deed, which is the practice of austerities and asceticism. So he left the palace, he left his wife and child. This is a big deal, yeah? So and this shows us, I've mentioned before, if you think of this in a modern way, of somebody like Prince William, say, leaving his wife and child, and can you imagine the effect that would have on people? So the Buddha left his wife and child and all his family and the royal palace, and went in search of the truth and how he could realize it, and the truth and how he could see if there was an escape from all the sufferings that he'd experienced or that he'd seen others experience. He hadn't really experienced them himself at this point. So he went to many teachers, but at this point that we're on, this point of the austerities, is when he met up with these 5 ascetics, these sages, holy men, who were practicing the spiritual path, but they were doing so in such a way that was extremely mortifying of the flesh. They hardly ate anything. Just a few grains of rice a day, but somehow they managed to exist on that. And he joined them, and he stayed with them for 6 years. So he became like a skeleton. Of course, they were meditating all the time and by the river, and he followed suit, and he did the same thing. But even after 6 years, really what happened was that although he'd attained a level of samadhi, of good meditation, he still hadn't got to the root of why we suffer, why is there all this suffering. But nevertheless, he felt that this time had not been wasted, because at least it had kind of counteracted his life of luxury and indulgence that he'd had before. So he'd gone completely to the other extreme and devoted himself 100% to these practices of asceticism. So he's shown by doing that as long as someone's attached to money and clothes and all the worldly pleasures of this life, then full dedication to a spiritual life is not possible. But if one gives up attachment, then the achievement of Buddhahood becomes a possibility. So that's why he started off in that way, by engaging in the austerities. But in the end of that time, he realized that that wasn't the way either, because that's too extreme in the other direction. So, and he made him weak. He became like a skeleton. So he couldn't really practice as well as he might be able to if he had more strength. So at that point, he was offered a bowl of yogurt by this dakini, a shepherdess, but probably a dakini, who gave him this very rich bowl of yogurt. And he accepted it and ate it, and straight away he felt his strength returning, and he recovered his former splendor and strength from this special food. So at that point he decided, right, well, he's going to go and find the right place to sit. So he walked to what we now call Bodh Gaya, and he sat under the Bodhi tree. And that brings us to the 8th deed, which is taking his place at the Vajrasana, that means the Vajra seat in Bodh Gaya, under the Bodhi tree. So after giving up the ascetic practices, he went to the Bodhi tree and he vowed to stay there under the Bodhi tree and meditate and stay there until he reached full awakening and got to the bottom of why is there any end to suffering, and if so, what is it? That was his motivation, was to escape suffering, not just for himself, but for the sake of all beings. That was his whole motivation, was for the sake of all beings. As we said, he hadn't suffered himself very much at all, but he saw how it was for other beings, and not just human beings, but all beings. So, by doing this, the Buddha demonstrated that the practice should be in the middle way of the two extremes, so not too austere, but not too indulgent. The first extreme being when you're starving yourself and allowing yourself to get weaker, or the other one of being too self-indulgent and engaging completely in distractions. And following your desires, which become endless. It's like drinking, if you're thirsty, it's like drinking seawater. You think you're going to quench your thirst, but it only makes you want more and more. So that's what desires are, if you just follow them all the time. So the Buddha went through all this to show us that we have to avoid the extremes of either side and just practice, you could say, the middle way. So there he was, sitting under the Bodhi tree, and then we come to the 9th deed, which is the victory over the leader of the Maras. Now the Maras is the temptations that come to distract you. When you want to meditate, I'm sure we can identify with this, we all get lots of temptations, lots of distractions coming into our mind. So he had to try and get over this. And he had these Maras, these temptations, were personified by this the king of the Maras, who was called Papian. And so when the Buddha went to sit under the tree, and he vowed not to get up from that seat until he'd reached full enlightenment and come to the root, got to understand suffering and the way out of it. So he sat down and composed himself. No sooner had he entered into a meditative state that this Papian, the leader of the Maras, came to disturb him with the 3 disturbing emotions, which we also call the root causes, the mind poisons, the main root causes, which is ignorance, desire, really strong desire, or strong aggression and kind of violence, you could say. So the first deception that the king of the Maras sent his way was that of ignorance. So the Buddha was asked to, in his meditative state, these Maras came and said to him that his father had died, his king Shuddhana had died, and that his evil cousin Devadatta had taken over the kingdom. So they were kind of hitting him where it hurts, isn't it? His father had died, and his kingdom had been taken over by this really nasty man, who was his cousin Devadatta. But it did not disturb the Buddha's meditation. He remained one-pointed. So then Mara sent Papayan sent his daughters. He thought, well, he'll try desire. He had very beautiful daughters. So he sent these visions of his beautiful daughters, very seductive, and kind of doing their best to seduce the Buddha. But even this did not disturb his meditation. And then, when this didn't work, then the Mara Papayan decided to use aggression and hatred, and so he kind of came towards the Buddha surrounded by millions of horribly frightening warriors who were throwing weapons at the Buddha's body. But the Buddha was not distracted or fooled by these visions, and he maintained his composure, maintained his meditation, remained immersed in the mind full of compassion and loving kindness which had motivated him, and triumphed over this display of distractions and was able to eventually achieve full omniscient enlightenment. Which brings us to the 10th deed, which is the attainment of enlightenment reached while meditating under the Bodhi tree. So since the Buddha developed all the qualities of meditation to the utmost, he was able to reach enlightenment. And he did this to demonstrate to us that we can also reach enlightenment. In fact, one of the main points of the whole Buddhist philosophy is to show us that Buddhahood is something to be found not outside of us, but inside ourselves, achieved by looking inside ourselves. In the same way that Buddha Shakyamuni reached enlightenment, we can also reach enlightenment. That was the reason he went through all this. And to show that the qualities that he attained, we can also attain. And that also the Buddha managed to eliminate all the negative emotions, the same ones that we currently experience. So this is the blueprint he's giving us here. Then we come to the 11th deed, which is teaching the Dharma. So the Buddha turned the wheel of Dharma 3 times. That doesn't mean to say he only gave 3 teachings. He gave thousands of teachings because he would teach everyone that he met according to their capabilities, and they would understand them on that level. So his teachings were very, very different, because people are very different, and their level of understanding is very different. So that he would only teach them what would be useful for them to evolve to the next stage. So when we talk about the 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma, so the first turning of the wheel of Dharma is called the Hinaya, which consists of the teachings of the 4 Noble Truths and meditation and developing an understanding of emptiness of self. We haven't got time to go into any of this, so this is really just for you to explore. And the second is the Mahayana Teaching, which is lots and lots and lots of teachings. Each one of these embodies lots of teachings. These are just the categories. Mahayana teachings, which involves the study of emptiness, of all phenomena, and of practicing the Bodhisattva path. The path to enlightenment, not only for yourself, but for the sake of all beings. And then the third turning of the wheel is the Vajrayana, which involves the previous 2, but also the understanding that everything is not completely empty, that there is also Buddha nature, and that Buddha nature pervades all sentient beings. And this is really key, because this we forget all the time. Hence, we still have wars, arguments. I mean, all beings have Buddha nature, from the tiniest ant to the biggest elephant, and all the human beings, of course, as well. So he gave all of these teachings. His whole life was devoted to giving teachings, to explaining to people in a way that was going to suit them best. And so in Buddhism, we don't just expect our happiness or suffering to come from the Buddha. The belief is not that if we please the Buddha and make offerings to him, then he will give us blessings and happiness, and if we displease the Buddha, he will throw us into hell or samsara or whatever. It's not like that. The possibilities of happiness or of reaching liberation are entirely up to us. So if we practice the path that leads to liberation, we will attain Buddhahood. But if we don't practice it, we really can't expect to reach Buddhahood because we're not traveling that path. It would be unrealistic, yeah? It's not enough to say, I'm a Buddhist, and think that it's going to just fall into your lap. So the thing is, it's in our hands whether we want to find happiness or suffering. It's our choice. So first we have to stop looking in the wrong place. But there's still something that comes from the Buddha that is the path to liberation. So he's provided us with the means. By turning the wheel of Dharma and by living his life in the way that he did with all beings in mind, he's given us the blueprint for how to go about our own lives in our own way. But it's our choice. And then lastly, the 12th deed, which was the passing away at the age of 83 in the town of Kushinagara. The Buddha, when he knew he was going to die, he knew that time had come, and he asked his students to gather round, and if they had any final questions that they needed resolving, so he resolved anything. And then he lay on his side in the lion posture, and his last words were, bhikkhus means monks or sangha, never forget, decay is inherent in all composite things. Therefore, work diligently now. And then he gave his final teaching, which was to pass away, and that final teaching was, of course, on death and impermanence. So that's brought us back to here and now. And that's a brief look at the praises in praise of the 12 deeds of the Buddha. So those are the 12 deeds that we've gone through. And we've actually, that's still very concise, but the praise of the 12 deeds is even more concise. So that's what we're going to do next. Now, I'm going to read it out, but I'd like you to engage with it by saying the mantra after each verse. Oops, excuse me. I think I might need to wet my whistle. So the mantra, Shakyamuni mantra, is Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. And roughly translated it means Om is like the origin of all things. Muni means sage. Muni, sage. Mahamuni, great sage. Shakyamuni, great sage of the Shakya clan. Soha is like hail. All hail to something like that. And then there's a sort of a melody that goes with it. So I'll say it and then, or recite it, and then you can have a go with me, and then we'll say it after each verse. I might need my glasses for this. I don't know it off by heart. And the print's a bit small. So for the mantra, it's Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. So we say it quite slowly, and it has this kind of little tune. No, I'm just going to demonstrate it first. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. That's lovely. So I'll read each verse, and at the end of each verse, we'll chant the mantra. So this is in praise of the Buddha's 12 deeds, and it was written by Arya Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna wrote these praises, beautiful poetic praises. So it starts off, homage to the Buddha Shakyamuni. You I shall praise who first awakened the mind of enlightenment, then completed the accumulations of merit and wisdom, and now in this age, through the vast sway of your actions, have become Lord and Protector of living beings. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. Homage to you who, having taught the gods, knew the time had come to tame the human world, and descending from the God realm like a great elephant, foresaw the family of your birth, and entered the womb of Mayadevi. Muni, Muni, Mahamuni, Shakyamuni Soha. Homage to you, Prince of the Shakyas, born after 10 months, your spacious Lumbini Grove, where Brahma and Indra revered you, your supreme marks proving you are destined to be enlightened. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. Homage to you, lion among men, in all your youthful vigor, displaying your pride in the games at Magadha, where you triumphed over the proud contestants so that not one could stand as your rival. Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. Homage to you who, to comply with worldly convention and avoid all misdeeds, took on a queen and courtiers, and by acting with such skillful means, you ruled the kingdom. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. Homage to you who foresaw that samsara is wholly futile, renounced the life of a householder, and traveling through the sky, ordained yourself before the Vishuddha Stupa. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. Homage to you who, intent on persevering till enlightened, for 6 years practiced austerities on the banks of the Narayana, and taking diligence to its ultimate perfection, attained the supreme samadhi. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. Homage to you who, seeking to make meaningful all your efforts made throughout beginningless time, sat unmoving in the Vajra posture beneath the Bodhi tree in Magadha, and awakened into true Buddhahood, attaining perfect enlightenment. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. Homage to you who, in your compassion, gazed at once upon living beings, then turned the wheel of Dharma in sacred places like Varanasi, and established disciples in the three vehicles. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. Homage to you who destroyed evil-minded opponents by defeating the 6 teachers of the Tirthakas, Devadatta and the rest, as well as the Maras in Varanasi. You were the mighty sage, victorious in battle. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. Homage to you who performed great miracles in Sroasti, unmatched in their splendor in all the 3 realms, and through the offerings made by gods, humans, and other beings, caused the teachings to prosper and increase. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. Homage to you who, to spur the lazy onto the Dharma, left your body like a vajra and passed into parinirvana in the pure abode of Kushnagata. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. Homage to you who, to show that you had not in reality perished, and so that beings in the future could gain merit, emanated a wealth of relics and caused your remains to be divided into 8 portions. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. Through the merit of briefly praising in this way the great acts of the Lord who is master of the teachings, may the actions of all living beings come to equal those of the Sugata himself. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. 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 Shakyamuni Soha. Shakyamuni Soha. Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Soha. dedicate the merit of our practice to all sentient beings, which is the prayer on the bottom of the page. So first of all in English. Through the wholesomeness of this practice, may all the mental defilements be overcome, and may all beings be liberated from the ocean of samsara, stirred by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. And in the Tibetan, Sanam di tamche sikpani, topne nipe danam pamcheni, jigana chi bala drapai, sepe sole doa doa sho. So I hope that was useful, meaningful for you. And yeah, that concludes our practice together today. Hopefully the first of many more to come. But before we leave the shrine room, I've got an announcement to make while we're still together. Because, well, once we get up, we can go and have a drink. I don't know about you, but I'm really going to have a water for now. But there's something a bit more interesting to drink through there, in the reading room. Fruit punch, non-alcoholic. So we can have that in a minute. But I just wanted to make an announcement before we all depart, because we can go through to the reading room in the courtyard also, because it's a nice day. So if you want to be out, if you prefer to be outside, you might feel more comfortable being outside in the open air. Also, the yoga room is set up so you can wander wherever you want. So while I've got your captive audience, I want to just say a couple of things. So yeah, thanks to the vaccination program and the easing of restrictions, I'm hoping that we can slowly start to open starting in June, which is not very far, isn't it? It's not even 2 weeks away. And the thought I had was that we could possibly open just one day a week, and alternate that day between being a midweek evening, maybe for meditation, and then the next week it could be a weekend morning, a sort of time, 11 o'clock, something like that, and for a puja or something else. Well, that was my initial thought about it, and that we could manage that. Well, we could manage that if it's we, but I can't do it single-handedly. So I'd just like you to consider whether you might be able to help out at all, because as you saw today, Michael was seeing people in and Elan was on the door. So I need at least 2 people to be around just to bring people in, because we have to keep socially distant, and it's not just like everyone piling in off the street. And the other thing is that anyone who wants to come to anything would have to book, like as if you were doing a course. So I know who's here, we can keep control of the numbers and have the names and the contact through email. So we have to compromise in that way. But it's very easily doable, but not for one person. So, I'm talking also to people who may listen online, not just people in this room, but if you might be able to come. And what it entails basically is being here half an hour before anybody else. So, and maybe 15 minutes at the end. So maybe an hour of your time, plus the fact that you want to be here to do the meditation or the puja or whatever it is you would want to come to anyway. So it's not a huge commitment, but it is a commitment. Yeah, if you could maybe have a think about that. And if that means that there's only 4 sessions in a month. So in June there will only be 4 sessions, 2 of which will be meditation, 2 of which will probably be pujas, 2 of which will be at the midweek evening, probably either Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And then the weekend would be Saturday or Sunday morning, you know, so if the event is from 11 till 12, say, or 12 to 12:30, then it would mean being here half an hour before that. So you don't have to decide right this second, unless you already know. If you already know, by all means put your hand up. If you're not sure, oh well, yes, 1, 2, and Michael, I think you already saw 3, 4. Okay, we're cooking, but we need to decide who is doing it when and all the rest of it. So maybe I don't want to make too much of it right now. I think if we go and have a drink first, but maybe anybody who over the period of being here today, if you do think you want to do it, then we could all meet back in here in half an hour, say, or something like that, and I can make a list of who can do what, because it's only around the corner, so I need to get some people for that. Don't feel obliged in any way. It's just something to consider, and you know, as I say, it has to be enabled by other people than just me. I have to also give a lot of praise to Marcus and Michael, who have both been really supporting throughout, and I couldn't have done it without them, so thank you both. Okay, so I think that's it for now. So before you disperse, I should also say thank you to the people who are joining us online. Thank you for coming, even though I can't see you. I hope you enjoy the day, and yeah, we're going to have a nice fruit punch, and I suggest you do the same. Go and get yourself a really nice one, and yeah, we'll drink to that. Okay, so thank you for joining us, whether you're in person or online, and yeah, keep safe, be well, and be happy.